wait another minute for more people to join us, but welcome and thank you for showing up today. If you could, please rename yourself with your city and or your organization and your pronouns if you prefer. Right.
All right. Kyle, I think I've seen you at every single one we have ever hosted, and it's good to see you again.
Right on. Okay, we'll give it another couple of seconds here. Hello. Thank you, Franklin, for coming on screen. Good to see you. Good to see some faces. If you feel comfortable, you're more than welcome to. But all right, we're going to go ahead and get started. As people get in here and join us, we have a full agenda today, so we want to be respectful of your time. But welcome to Greenlink Analytics Community of Practice on our natives' lands, where we will be talking to you about our newest indicator and contextualizing how we will be using this within our work and how we hope to equip you all on how to better incorporate Indigenous philosophies and ways of life into your work as well. So like I mentioned, this is our community of practice. This is our space to connect movers and shakers like yourself, advancing environmental and social equity, and to really get with each other to do some peer learning and data literacy. Our equity team, our entire team is here with us today. Shout out. This is our first team exercise, so you get to see all our lovely faces. We are made up of 4 individuals. Myself, my name is Angelica Chavez Duckworth. I am Director of Community Initiatives. And we also have Sharanya Madhaven. She can wave. She is so cute. Samantha Houck, our equity assistant, and then Daniel Wagner, our gym project manager. And just for context, Greenlink Analytics, we are a 501c3 based in Atlanta, Georgia, although we do work nationwide. And we are a collective of energy and equity researchers working together to advance an equitable clean energy transition as fast and as fair as possible. And today we are going to have the opportunity to get into one of our tools that we use at Greenlink, our Greenlink Equity Map, or what we like to call GEM. GEM is a visualization platform that incorporates multiple different equity indicators from health, socioeconomic and environmental inequities, and being able to look at those across the nation at the census tract level for every area, for all the census tracts throughout the US. Currently, we have 58 cities using the platform. We also have 91 community-based organizations that are members of the platform and 646 active members in the platform. And like I said, we will have time to actually get in this and play with this today, focusing on our native lands indicator. So we have like I mentioned, a full agenda. I just, briefly did the unsexy part of the introduction, and we will get into some of the cooler parts later. But we are going to run through our land acknowledgement and our Indigenous philosophies. We will have a breakout session and then roll back into our purpose and why we are having this workshop today. Then we will actually talk about our methodology for creating our native lands indicator, and then get into the GEM platform for you guys to play with it yourself for the first time. And then we will wrap this up with a Q&A. So without further ado, I am going to hand it off to Samantha.
Hello, everyone. So I like to start by emphasizing that this is a safe and brave learning space. So please take notes, ask questions, and speak up. Throughout this, we're learning together, and there will always be more to learn from the diversity of communities around us. Now, before we get into our new indicators, let's talk about what a land acknowledgement is. It's a background. So land acknowledgements are, in a sense, the beginning of conversations between organizations and the Indigenous communities you're working with or for and on their land. It's a good place to start to repair relationships with Native communities and the land. Land acknowledgements support larger truce and reconciliation efforts by reminding people colonization is still happening due to broken treaties and deception. The aims in a land acknowledgement are creating spaces with reverence and respect for what Indigenous ancestors have been through, that Indigenous people are here today and going through, and commitment to ongoing meaningful action in building relationships with Native communities. It's really important that you don't copy others' land acknowledgements. Make these personal and meaningful commitments for action. Specifically speak of the community's land you're on and who you're working with by the community's names and their preferred names, not ones given to them by outsiders. For example, the Iroquois Confederacy was a colonizer's name for the Haudenosaunee. With that being said, there are over 575 Native nations and more unrecognized tribes in the US alone. We'll get into that in a second. So if you're a remote or county-based organization, focus on the communities you're specifically working with, or acknowledge the Indigenous ancestors, lands, and communities as a whole in your commitment and journey, focusing on your action pieces so as not to make generalizations. In doing so, make sure you're doing your research and know the people you're acknowledging based on where you're working and who you are working with. When I say research, this means spending time and money researching to educate yourselves and team on top of speaking with communities and compensating them for their time and energy in teaching you. Remember always that actions speak louder than words. For creating systematic changes, your promises to action must be met. So this starts by creating sustainable relationships with the communities. And for this to happen, consistency and action tied to promises is important. These are verbal promises not to be taken lightly. And again, meaningful action part is critical. Also, keep these in present tense as much as possible. With the next slide, we're gonna give our land acknowledgement. So where we walk and where we live are the traditional homelands to many of our Indigenous ancestors and remain home to diverse communities and nations of Native peoples today. The work we, the Greenlink Analytics Equity Team, will be sharing with you today regarding our new Native Land Indicator and our upcoming listening tour is our way to begin creating healing spaces. We aim to bridge relationships for us to start braiding and weaving the organizations we work with and Native communities' knowledge together. This combination of knowledge brings critical information to the social and environmental movements. The land we walk was and remains Native land. So now we're going to go into a little bit about land recognition with the next slide. So briefly, historically, tribal nations don't think of land or nations in the same way we do today. The idea of owning land and singular family housing are very Western ideas that played a part in the creation of policies and treaties filled with differences in understanding. A topic for another day because it's very long, but with that being said, these differences in understanding communities, ancestral lands, and land practices played a part in the system set up today between the US and Native nations. Under the US Constitution and numerous treaties, the federal government undertook the protection of federally recognized tribes from the states. The benefit of this is those recognized are eligible for funding and services through the Bureau of Indian Affairs and certain amounts of protection, stronger today than in the past, by the federal government for having their lands purchased or taken by non-natives. The US federally continues to recognize tribes with government-to-government relationships where the tribes exist politically in a domestic dependent nation status. This does not mean that Native nations are dependent on the US for making all political decisions within their community. Tribal sovereignty in the US is, sorry, I started shaking. This is my first time presenting. So tribal sovereignty in the US is defined as the inherent authority of Indigenous tribes to govern themselves within the borders of the US, and something tribes work to maintain and inform others on. This means many Native nations have their own governments, and those with land often have their own police forces. Now, with this being said, this means many Native nations, their relationship has certain limitations and accesses influences. For quick examples, Native nations do not have their own armies, so many serve in the US military, nor do they always have support from the federal government when it comes to education or missing and murdered Indigenous relatives on or off Native territories, and are often under-resourced food, energy, clean water. With this being said, today there are about 574 federally recognized tribes, 326 reservations, and over 100 tribes with acknowledged tribal status in different states. State recognition does not always guarantee funding though some states and counties are working to build relationships with tribes to take action. And a shout out to San Diego County with their new tribal community program manager and their recognition of the 18 different tribes in their region. So with starting these conversations and speaking to some of this history, it's now time to dive into our philosophies to applications with bridging, braiding, and weaving. So we'll go to the next slide. And this is our journey as Greenlink Analytics starts by releasing our natives lands layer you're going to learn about today. And what's GLA's next step? To apply and respectfully include Indigenous philosophies and collective methods with our team's Western research methods. So this is braiding. Dr. Merlia Ballard is the Director of Environment and Climate Change Canada's new division of Indigenous Science and an Anishinaabe scholar from the University of Manitoba. As the director, she has been leading the team to mandate this bridging, braiding, and weaving philosophy to combine Western and Indigenous science, and that's what we're doing. So starting with bridging, as I kind of described already, it's a process to increase awareness and recognition of Indigenous science, to build relationships on respect and repatriation. So we are launching a new listening tour. On this listening tour, we are speaking with a diversity of Native leaders and organizations through Indian country to begin braiding, bringing together different ways of knowledge and being for holistic understanding. So this means bringing Western and Indigenous knowledge together to understand the environment while maintaining integrity of each system in a mutual learning space to collective benefit. Through this, we begin to build a picture together on how Greenlink Analytics can weave melding Indigenous and Western science to make better informed decisions. And weaving is a path towards reconciliation by applying self-determined Indigenous methodologies, science indicators, and perspectives for systematic change. We will ask questions on how data and mapping tools can support Native communities and gain insights on how we can raise awareness about Indigenous data sovereignty, knowledge, and science. By cultivating healthier and more just communities does not come without deep reflection on the imperative question of how did we get here today? In doing so, we're bringing that Indigenous wisdom and reflection into conversations on how to problem solve. Now, with that, we're going to go into some questions before diving into purpose and the new Native Lands Indicator. So I'm going to pass it back off to Jellie.
All right. Thank you so much, Samantha. What a breadth of knowledge. And I'm actually going to kick it over to Daniel to queue up our breakout rooms. We are going to take some time to reflect on what was just said while answering this question. So Daniel, take it away. I realized that I was muted the entire time I was saying that. I said there's never enough time for breakouts because we're just getting into a great conversation, but we'll have some more time to connect with each other later on in this space today. But thank you guys for sharing within your groups. We are going to move on. I do want to take some time to kind of share with you about why Greenlink Analytics is doing this type of work and what our commitment, as Sammy so beautifully put, what our commitment is to putting not only Native lands on the map, but actually starting our journey to working with Native peoples and repairing this and understanding that this journey is very long and an intentional one that we have to treat with a lot of purpose. So a couple of the reasons that we, one, putting this indicator on the map and also are starting a listening tour. Our listening tour is specifically around interviewing movers and shakers across the country around what type of gaps in climate, environmental, social, equity, housing, all of the things, health, right? are in this movement and how we can best support that with not only our services, but our tools as well. And so understanding as an equity team that there are all communities need to be involved. And one community we realized that was critical to this movement that has not been a major part of this conversation in the clean energy space is Native peoples and Indigenous peoples. And so first and foremost, we want to understand that Native lands are ancestral and contemporary, and understand the contemporary connections of Indigenous peoples to a geographic area. We also really want to build solidarity with Native peoples to help repair past and current harms that have been done onto the land and to the people. And very specifically to our group, we want to address the inaccurate and undercounting of Native communities in federal data collection, like the American, the ACS, and then the census as well. And we will get into that a little bit later as we dive into the platform. But noticing that that was a huge gap was one of our pain points that we wanted to address. We also want to make sure we are including Native peoples as part of the equitable clean energy transition and making sure that they're also getting a lot of this federal funding that is coming down and they are not being missed. And of course, at the end of the day, we want to improve the relationship of people with our history and the sacredness of the land around them. So hoping to build stewardship in this process in a meaningful way. So as we navigate the rest of this presentation, wanting to understand how Native lands can be used in your work, whether it's through the indicator or through the knowledge that Samantha shared with us around how we braid and weave and bridge and braid and weave this into our spaces. And so first and foremost, like understanding the contextualization that this brings to your work. So asking ourselves, like, how did we get here today? Whether you're in the clean energy space, the environmental space, the social equity space, asking ourselves that question, like, how did we arrive here, helps us understand how not to repeat the same things, perpetuate past harms into the present day. As well as supporting each other in this movement. So, that phrase, like, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go further, go together. So making sure that everybody is truly involved and included in this movement work that we do. And then repair, not just repair past harms in our history, but also repair the land and the relationship. So how do we both not just protect the people, but also Mother Earth? And so as we think through this, putting this into the context of your work is going to be look different from everybody. Your journey at arriving into this space and understanding is going to look different from everybody, but that is welcome here. And we're hoping to start these conversations and hopefully, again, be able to share with you the conversations that we're having as we embark on this next listening tour. So thank you for listening to that. I'm now going to take you to the cool work that Shar has. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. And I'm going to take you back to Daniel, where we're going to go to a poll real quick.
Yeah, so we just this is a short question poll, and I'll put the question again in the chat. We're really looking to see what kind of things you're looking forward to taking away from the session. Knowledge, learning about, more about GEM. Are you here just because you really think we're cool? Whatever it may be, we would really like to know. It helps us build our community of practices to be the best they can be. And you just take a moment here to just jot something down real quick. We would much appreciate it. All right. So long, my City of Orlando interns. Y'all are great. And I will leave that poll up. So if you don't feel rushed that you gotta, if you could just get it to us here. All right, it looks like actually all of you have filled it out, and we very much appreciate that. And if you want, Jellie, we can move on to our next section.
All right, thank you. Again, we will take these answers and hopefully create more dialogue at the end here. But really appreciate you taking the time to answer that. That helps us be able to make sure we're meeting your needs and curiosities in this space as well. So now, without further ado, I will take you to the data scientists who actually created the methodology that we are going to see in GEM today. Take it away, Shar.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Shar again. I'm going to go through our native lands indicator today, and then after this, we'll all be able to explore it further in the platform. So you'll get the interactive piece, which will be exciting for you all to get into that. But before I do that, we're going to go through, or I'm going to go through the native lands indicator. So this data comes from Native Land Digital and the census. So as Jellie and Sammy touched on, there's a lot of data gaps with the US Census data and mapping Native American percentages, but also we have federally recognized tribes that Sammy touched on. So specifically 574. So what we set out to do for this native lands indicator is essentially combine the two. So we could look at both of them overlaid in GEM. So from Native Land Digital, which if you are not familiar with Native Land Digital, we've provided a screenshot of what their map looks like, which is what you're looking at on the screen here, which is all of the native lands essentially mapped on the US. As you can see, these are historical boundaries. So Native Land Digital is an Indigenous-led Canadian nonprofit that basically maps historical native lands, not only across the US, but across the world. So we took a lot of their data that they had for the US, and we mapped this and integrated it with the census data, which comes from ACS. So that the census data shows 574 federally recognized tribes. And Jellie, if you can go to the next slide. When we integrated it, this is kind of what it's going to look like in GEM. So I have an example here for Oklahoma City. So as you can see, the areas that are dark orange on the map are going to show federally recognized tribes specifically. However, we have federally recognized tribes, state recognized tribes, as well as historical tribes in this map. So the orange areas are going to show federally recognized, but on the hover and as well on the download, we're going to see the historical tribes as well. So we can kind of see these data gaps in here. So for example, and I'll show this in a second, but if we overlay and try to understand the intersectionality between some of this data as well as other data sets we have Native American racial percentages from the ACS. So we can kind of see the data gaps if the ACS says only 2%, but then there is a federally recognized tribe in an area, maybe this shows the data gap that we're seeing here. So that all being said, I'm going to share my screen and just kind of walk you through the indicator, and then we'll all go into breakout rooms so you all can see it for yourself. All right, can you all see this? Thumbs up. Good. Okay, sweet. All right, so I just have Santa Fe here as an example, and then in breakout rooms we can go through your own cities or whatever we please in that moment. But for Santa Fe here, I just have our equity indicator selected. So if I go down to this list, I already have it selected. So here, I will unselect it. And then if I go down to native lands, it'll show you how this indicator looks on the map. So just having this indicator, I can go and hover into some of these areas and see the tribes associated with these areas. So if I look at the federally recognized tribes, that's what is showing up as orange on the map. So Santo Domingo, for example, is a federally recognized tribe associated with the census tract, but as well as we have historical tribes that are associated with that land as well. So now if I go in here and select another indicator, for example, we can look at energy burden. We can see areas that have a high energy burden, but also are associated with federally recognized tribes, right? So the area that has a really dark yellow color here has Santo Domingo as a federally recognized tribe, but also has a really high energy burden. So this allows us to include the right communities as a part of the clean energy transition, as Jellie mentioned earlier, and also understand some of these gaps. So speaking to gaps, if we go down to racial composition in here and click Native American, right? So up here we have an example where there are federally recognized tribes, and from the census, we have 30% Native American, right? But if I go one census tract over, we still have federally recognized tribes. However, the Native American percentages from the ACS is 0%. So we can see the data gaps here. So it's important to, more than ever in these census tracts, to include these communities, right? So this is kind of just one example of how this data set can be used, and it's most powerful when integrated with some other data sets that we have in the platform. So I'm going to leave it there. I know those were just two indicator examples that I had, but we'll have an opportunity to go into the breakout rooms and talk a little bit more and explore a little bit more here. So I will leave it there and pass it over to Jellie.
Thanks, Shar. You want to stop share screen and then I
Yes.
will. Thanks. Okay, so we are actually going to play ourselves now. So here's all the information that you need. So you were going to go to gem.equitymap.org. So if you want to get in there, and we have our user and password for today, where it will actually get you into Gem. Yep, so once you get in there, get thumbs up. The user is going to be cpjune@greenlinkanalytics.org. And the password, the C is capitalized and P June is all lowercase 2023. Thanks, Danielle. You can just copy and paste it like in the chat. And then once you're in there, if you could just give me a thumbs up or mention in the chat that you're good, that'd be great, because then I'm going to pass it over to the guru, Daniel, to get us into breakouts, and we'll get in a workshop going. So just give me a thumbs up once you're in there, or a smiley face in the chat. Okay. Got a couple people in there. Thanks, Kyle. All right. Yeah, we could probably break, and if anybody else needs help, then we can help them in the breakout rooms. So. Okay, we're back again. We were getting into deep conversation just as we're leaving. But I hope that that was meaningful for you all. I do want to kind of open it up to the floor now for any additional questions or comments that you have about your breakout sessions, seeing the native lands in the map, anything that you guys discussed that you want to share out with this group. And we are a pretty small, intimate group, so feel free to come off mute or raise your hand, however you feel comfortable.
So I have a question. Earlier you were saying that I think you have GEM has more than 600 active members, right? Probably, if I don't do a mistake. So what do you mean by active members?
Daniel, you want to answer?
I was gonna, yeah, we can sit here and figure out his answer. We have over 640, or we're at 646 active members. It's people using GEM actively that we have registered with GEM accounts that are using GEM.
They are using it there like for individual research purpose or on behalf of any organization, or?
They're using with organizations. It's people that are working on a community level, a city level, working towards energy and social equity.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great question. It's a number of things, just because, a lot of this work is at the intersection of health, environment, and social equity, and housing and energy, all the things. So we have a large swath of community-based organizations who do get free access if they are working locally and they are making under 5 million a year. So we want to make sure it gets in the hands, and it's subsidized for those who are working on the ground at the grassroots level. And then we do a number of projects with cities across the country that still get access to this to help their policy and program creation and making sure that it's equitable, as well as their community engagement processes at the city community level.
So the access is not like open source. I need to pay, right?
It's not open source. Yeah, we have to talk to university as well.
Okay, thank you.
But you're working with a coalition right now, so there are ways that could be. We work with coalitions before in the past, so we can talk about that. You can talk to Daniel offline.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments from the breakout sessions or what's been presented today?
This is Brittany. I have a question. Hi, from the breakout session. So I was asking a question about the source for like the percentage breakdown of like who, I don't know if it was defined as race or ethnicity, but the percentage breakdown within the census tract, and that's from American Community Survey. So I was wondering, could a reason for the data gap be just how the data is being collected from American Community Survey in those areas? Like, it's like, what is the expectation, for it, and how are they reaching people? Because I'm tribal. I'm from the Halawasa tribe, and I can tell you a lot of my folks don't trust anybody coming to ask them questions. So I could think of like so many reasons why there's mistrust or like not providing the information or responding. But I was just wondering if you have any like thoughts about what could be causing those data gaps. And the other thing is just, this included American Community Survey. Is it also looking at what the census is reporting for those populations, or is that not included in this?
There's a loaded question, and I think Samantha is off mute too. Or are you on mute? I can't tell. Nope, you're not. Okay, I want to give it up to my team to answer that collectively, because there's a lot there. So whoever feels comfortable, but I really appreciate that. So looks like Daniel, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I can kind of explain how the gathering of data is for the ACS. So they do phone interview, mailer, they go door to door, use census. And what they're doing is they create estimates based on what they gather. So they're not going door to door every person in the country. They don't talk to 375 million. They poll a group and then can use that to make a rational expectation on it. They always include with their data their margins of error. They acknowledge that it's not perfect science with any polling or data collection. You're going to have margins when you're dealing with such a large group, but that's how they go about. And yes, it does cause data gaps at times, because anytime you're not 1, 2, 3, 4 counting, you're going to end up with a little bit of a gap. But I would be more than happy, Brittany, if you want to talk offline to like discuss more on ACS. It's one of my secret passions. I love me some ACS data.
We're data nerds over here for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, I love that, to like best wrap my head around all of the details, because I think it would better help me also, like if we're using this tool with translating what the numbers mean to our tribal partners.
Definitely. Absolutely. Again, I invite you also, we mentioned the listening tour that we'll be doing, to have a conversation with me and Samantha, who will be leading that as well, to be more in depth to kind of answer these. Definitely, we have our information at the end here. You can take that down. But I did want to answer your other question that was paired to this around data collection. And I invite you to read a piece that we did on data sovereignty and the gaps specifically within data collection. And part of the, I would add a component to that with that right now, there are very limited options to actually identify as like Native. And, you know, I don't want to speak for you. And then again, we have Samantha here and yourself, part of the community, but because the Native communities are just as like diverse and not monolithic as other communities are, you know, some of the percentages really matter for some communities, and some of the percentages of, you know, blood and ancestry matter for others. And so identifying within a very limited census like pool is not useful and not accurate data to describe Native peoples. And so that actually, the limitation of the options within just the census data itself, I think, is also a component to the inaccuracy of which we are collecting it. And then, of course, I think, as Daniel mentioned, a lot of this, and we know this as a team, but data only speaks so much. And we are developing a qualitative arm and a community-driven arm for a purpose, because we want to make sure that we are ground truthing the raw numbers. And to your point, Brittany, that we are actually translating what the numbers mean. And if the numbers are not actually representative of what the community is experiencing, that we want to be able to speak to that. And so I think there are both ways. Just traditional Western science and data collection has been pretty extractive historically. And so just recognizing that just in itself, I think, are also components to it. So I open up to anybody else on my team who wants to share, but I really appreciate that question, because we want to keep digging into that and learning and unlearning, you know.
And I appreciate you sharing that all encompassing. I know we talked a bit about that in our breakout room, but for everyone else to hear, to add to that, I like to recommend the book by Tommy Orange, They're There. I already kind of pitched it, but it gives a good idea of like the urban Native experience and how it can be complicated in identity, with some history in there too. It's mostly a fictional story of different urban Natives' experience in Oakland. But it talks to some of the dilemmas that apply in the data that you're going to see and that we're talking to. And I think Jellie did a great job of covering like the complexities of like, this is really a first step. Like, we're using the public access data that's available, and this is a first step to going into then the qualitative and trying to find ways of preparing this to have more of a respectful representation of our Native communities on the map and in the data for systematic changes. Those are really big goals, and I know it's going to happen eventually. I'm hopeful, but it starts with these conversations and breaking this down and making it understandable for everyone. So thank you all. If there's any more questions, I think I ate up the last couple minutes there, so I'll pass it back to Jellie. Please do reach out to us.
Yeah, thank you. We are wrapping this up, but again, if there's any more lingering questions, please feel free to connect with us. I am going to pass it off to Daniel to close this out and just express our gratitude to our partners.
Yeah, just a really quick shout out to our GEM Leadership Committee. They're practitioners from across many disciplines who help us make GEM the best it can be. And also a big shout out to Upright Consulting, our thought partner. They help us make Greenlink the best that it can be. And of course, if you have any, you want to continue conversations, here are our emails for each of us. We are always open to continue this dialogue. And if one of us can't answer it immediately, we'll find an answer for you. And I think that would be for it. So thank y'all so much for coming to our community of practice. Our next one will be in July, on July 27th. So we look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you.
All right. Gracias a todos. We'll be in communication soon, but again, feel free to reach out to any one of us, but have a beautiful day. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.